Night, protecting Robert Mueller, cleaning up after Baltimore's cops,
sometimes you have to hit rock bottom so you can get back up.
and the EU's latest breakaway threat. At least 37 people are dead and more than 100 have been injured after a South Korean hospital went up in flames. Most of the patients were elderly. 26 of those who died were in their 80s or older. A doctor, a nurse, and a nurse's aide also died in the fire, which is the country's deadliest in almost a decade. Under existing safety standards, the sixth-floor building wasn't required to have a sprinkler system. Officials are still investigating the cause. Cecile Richards, the president of Planned Parenthood, will be stepping down this year. During her 12-year tenure, Richards has repeatedly had to defend the women's healthcare organization as it's come under partisan attack for providing abortions. Her departure comes as the Trump administration has tried to cut federal funding for Planned Parenthood and limit access to birth control. Steve Wynn, the billionaire casino mogul who serves as the Republican Party's finance chairman, is being accused of a, quote, decades-long pattern of sexual misconduct in a Wall Street Journal article based on the accounts of dozens of current and former employees of Wynn's properties. In one incident in 2005, Wynn reportedly forced a manicurist to have sex with him and later paid her a $7.5 million settlement. Numerous other employees recalled Wynn exposing himself and pressuring them into sexual contact. In a response to the Journal, Wynn said, quote, "The idea that I ever assaulted any woman is preposterous." After the report was published, the company's stock dropped more than 9%. New York and Minnesota are suing the federal government for cutting over $1 billion in funding for healthcare programs created under the Affordable Care Act. According to the joint lawsuit, the state's basic health programs serve more than 800,000 low-income people. New York's Attorney General said that the decision by the Department of Health and Human Services to make the cuts is a, quote, cruel and reckless assault. The department declined to comment on the pending litigation. The entire board of directors of USA Gymnastics will step down in an effort to clean house after its catastrophic failure to protect its athletes from abuse. The U.S. Olympic Committee issued a demand for the resignations on Thursday and threatened to decertify USA Gymnastics, which selects Olympic competitors, if it didn't comply. On Wednesday, former national team Dr. Larry Nassar was sentenced to as much as 175 years in prison for abusing girls in his care. Two Baltimore police officers are on trial this week in federal court for some of the worst misconduct imaginable. They're part of a group of 8 officers accused of robbery and extortion, faking evidence, and planting drugs, among other crimes. The officers were part of an elite group called the Gun Trace Task Force, set up by the mayor in 2007 to help fight rising crime and murder rates. The task force was supposed to check the flow of guns and get the worst guys off the street. And for a while, city leaders and reporters saw the task force as a huge success. But it was also completely corrupt, acting as what prosecutors have called a gang-style crime ring. 6 of the officers have already pleaded guilty. But there's a bigger problem. The task force's misconduct has tainted hundreds, if not thousands, of criminal cases. And in a city already infamous for horrible policing, it's shattered any remaining trust between cops and the community. Antonia Hilton met some of the people trying to figure out how to clean up the mess.
It's like so frustrating. This is like, oh yeah, this cop was charged for false information. This cop is alleged to have planted evidence. All right.
Deborah Levy is a Maryland public defender whose full-time job is now investigating the Gun Trace Task Force and trying to clear the names of its victims.
I have a spreadsheet of about 2,000 cases in general that we're trying to undo.
2,000 cases.
Yeah, 2,000 cases, and that's what we think would be a conservative number. I can't sleep at night because there's so many that I haven't undone. It's very stressful. It's really stressful.
Her job is not simple. Cops' internal affairs complaints are shielded from reporters, lawyers, and the public by state laws that protect officers' privacy. Levy has to fight in court to unseal them. And she thinks the task force misconduct is just the tip of the iceberg.
We're convinced that the web doesn't stop with the 8 indicted officers. So we'll take each indictment. And on each indictment, it'll say, on this date, this officer is alleged to have engaged in conduct with this particular officer with these initials. We've then now started filing for the internal affairs documents for the other officers who were present on the scene that day to see if they were involved.
In your opinion, do you think the gun trace task force ultimately made Baltimore more or less safe?
Less safe. I think that absolutely 100%. The city is pretty much fallen apart, right? The relationships between the police and the citizens of Baltimore. And that, at the end of the day, everything is based on trust.
Oh, boy, man. Golly. This guy I ran into was incarcerated with. Man, glad to see you home. I know you didn't even say I was home, man.
That's why I pulled over just to holler at you.
You know how I say what I say?
The police did some extra shit, some shit they weren't supposed to do.
Yeah.
January 2014, a group of officers, including 2 members of the gun trace task force, stormed Sean Whiting's home. The officers suspected he was a drug dealer and, he says, got a warrant to search his home under false pretenses. Once inside, Whiting says they tossed his house and stole $20,000 in cash, some of it drug money, and even took his children's video games.
Certain things come to the light, you know what I mean? When you lie about certain things.
Whiting filed a police misconduct complaint with Internal Affairs, but no one bought the story until 2017, when the cases piling up in federal indictments sounded very familiar. Do you think people listened to your voice, listened to what you were trying to tell them was going on?
Nah, they wouldn't listen to me at all.
Whiting's lawyer, Ivan Bates, helped him get his conviction overturned last year. Bates has reopened 19 cases involving the task force. In 17 of those cases, he's been able to get the charges dropped.
I'm not that good. No one's that good. Unfortunately, the task force was just that bad. And when you sit down...
What did you think when you read the indictments?
I knew it was coming. I mean, I've been living it. I've been seeing it. You know, there were individuals in the indictment that I knew their cases simply when I just read the indictment.
In this moment where we're post-Freddie Gray, consent decree, all these efforts to rehabilitate, and then this happens, what does this sort of represent for the city?
Sometimes you have to hit rock bottom so you can get back up.
An obvious question that will inevitably be asked of me and the mayor and many others is, are we surprised by the findings of this report?
Kevin Davis was appointed police commissioner in 2015, leading the department while the task force committed many of their crimes. There are neighborhoods that say you didn't listen, and you know what, we doubt that it's even, that brazen misconduct is confined to those 8 guys.
I can't argue someone out of their experiences or their emotions. And the trust thing, I don't have an easy answer for that. I know that it's our Goodwill bank account was significantly drawn upon by this incident.
Should you have found out earlier?
I have 3 full-time internal affairs detectives that are assigned to the FBI Baltimore Field Office Anti-Corruption Unit. The question, rather, for law enforcement is when bad things happen, and this is certainly a bad thing, what are you willing to learn from it, and what are you willing to acknowledge and do better to improve to decrease the likelihood that it'll ever happen again?
Just a few days after our interview, Davis was fired by Mayor Catherine Pugh.
We need violence reduction. We need the numbers to go down faster than they are.
Do you think there's going to have to be some kind of public apology, public reckoning?
I don't think we'll get that. I am not so interested in the public apology as much as I'm interested in getting to the bottom of it. Because until you do that, right, until we can be assured...
Your apology doesn't mean very much.
No. No, because I just still think there's still misconduct going on. I mean, there just has to be.
In the meantime, she's stuck undoing the damage one person at a time.
Hello?
So you know how you called me about your conviction?
Right.
They're willing to undo not just your conviction, but your two co-defendants' convictions.
Wow, that's absolutely great. You deserve a raise.
At this point, you can be very, very hopeful that everything's going to be expunged and it'll vanish off your record altogether.
Thank you very much. I really do appreciate it.
You're welcome. Take care.
Okay.
Bye.
All right.
Yay.
For Shawn Whiting, who was released in November 2017, it's 3.5 years behind bars, 3.5 years without his 6 kids.
Have you had a hard time getting back on your feet since November?
Hell yeah. You come from having a vehicle, you having a house, you having money, they take your money. It ain't like nobody giving me no free money. It's hard.
He lives with his aunt now, having lost his house while incarcerated. Apologies and reform won't get any of that back.
And we put him in the van, they go to our house and die.
It's past tense now.
Yeah.
Ain't nobody thinking about that. It's nobody thinking about it now. What's done is done. It's done.
Does it make you angry?
It don't make it, not no more. Nah, not no more. Because it's not going to change. It's not going to change. The only thing it's going to do is slow down. And before you know it, it's back at it again.
President Trump insisted today that reports that he attempted to fire Special Counsel Robert Mueller last June were fake news.
Typical New York Times fake stories.
That's, of course, what Trump always says about stories he doesn't like. And it's restarted the push in Congress to keep the president from taking Mueller out. Fake news or not, there are people who anticipated this might be a problem.
They have a constitutional responsibility to act now.
Senator Richard Blumenthal is a co-sponsor of one of several bills trying to protect the special counsel from being fired. There are also a few in the House, but the ones to pay attention to are the Senate bills, both of which have some bipartisan support. One from Senators Lindsey Graham and Cory Booker would require the Attorney General to have a panel of federal judges review the decision to fire a special counsel before going through with it.
Well, you mean so the review would be they can comment on it, they just can't reinstate. Is that the difference?
Yeah, they can't reinstate. They can make a decision that it was didn't meet the criteria of dismissal, then the political system would take over after that.
So it's a limited solution. The other Senate bill from Tom Tillis and Chris Coons would allow a special counsel to contest being fired after the fact, also before a panel of federal judges. But support for these bills isn't unanimous. Last September, the Senate Judiciary Committee held a hearing on the bills, and conservatives raised reasonable questions about whether it was constitutional to tie the president's hands.
Anytime we tinker with the division of power within the federal government, between these three branches of government, we do grave damage to the system.
That hearing was basically all the attention these bills got. Republican support fizzled last fall.
I don't hear much pressure to pass anything. There's been no indication that the president or the White House are not cooperating.
That seems to have changed with the New York Times report, which several other news outlets have confirmed. So if there's a renewed public focus on protecting Mueller, this time it'll be harder for Republicans to resist.
In the Czech Republic, voting is underway in the second and final round of the presidential election, pitting a pro-Europe academic, Jiří Drahoš, against the incumbent president, Miloš Zeman, a fierce nationalist and critic of the EU. The race appears to be close, but it's less about the two men running than it is about the country's right to self-determination and what it means to be from there.
Jo. Pravo, vlevo.
Jan Buksa has been shooting since he was 12 years old. He believes that owning a gun is a cultural right. And Czech law backs him up. All that's required to purchase a gun here is that the buyer is 21, has no criminal record, and passes a quick test.
Musím taky trošičku se udržovat ve svých 63 letech. A ono na tu střelbu je to potřeba, to jako, co si budeme vykládat, ono je potřeba taky trošičku.
Why do you love guns so much?
Já jsem přesvědčený, že každý člověk má v sobě v srdíčku lovce. A někdo to potlačí, tady tu vášeň, a u někoho naopak ta vášeň vstoupne.
But buying guns is harder now because of a new EU directive passed last year after investigators discovered that the guns used in the Charlie Hebdo attack had been purchased legally in Eastern Europe. The Czech government filed a lawsuit against the EU, saying that the directive discriminates against Czech culture. President Miloš Zeman publicly backed the suit. Are you voting in this presidential election? Who are you voting for, Zeman or Drahoš?
Zeman.
Why?
Myslím si, že lepší reprezentant pro Českou republiku je podle mě Zeman.
Zeman's opponent, Jiří Drahoš, former head of the Czech Academy of Sciences, is a classic pro-Europe liberal. In Zeman's view, a threat to national identity. Zeman practices a brash style of politics.
Na tom samopalu je vypálený nápis na novináře.
Displays like that make Zeman unpopular in big city Prague, but his rural supporters see him as a defender of the country he now calls Czechia, from Muslims and from migrants.
Migration is connected with terrorism because some jihadists are hidden inside migration wave.
Brussels is now suing the Czech Republic, along with Hungary and Poland, over their refusal to take in refugees. But the Muslim community here is actually very small. There are fewer than 22,000 in a country of 10 million. وش قد في البلد؟
في البلد كلها 5.
According to Bedr al-Waraiq, a local Muslim community leader, the anti-Islam rhetoric has left Muslims struggling with a rise in hate crimes. He moved to Prague 15 years ago.
ميلوش زمان يقول المسلمين عندهم ثقافة مختلفة إلى المجتمع التشيك ريبوبليك. شو تقول؟
يعني مع احترامي له كرئيس للدولة يعني وشخص قدم لبلده، لكن نظرته عن الإسلام جدا قاصرة وجدا يعني مخالفة للواقع. هذا انتهازية، فهو بدال لا يصب غضبه على الحكومة لا قاعد يصب غضبه على اللاجئ.
The anti-immigration, anti-Europe mood is being driven in part by hardline pro-Zeman websites. And Zeman himself is doing what he can to help. He's given dozens of interviews bashing the EU to a Czech news site notorious for being loose with the facts. Jakub Janda is a disinformation expert based in Prague. If President Zeman is elected again and his populist style of politics continues and his digital army are allowed to continue, what could that mean for the relationship with the EU?
The problem with Czech presidents is that they are, by our constitution, ceremonial figures. So they don't have many real powers.
But they set the rhetoric, right?
Yes, but they send a trend. They speak a lot, and they also can have quite a lot of impact on foreign policy of the country, which can mean that President Zeman already said several times that he would support a referendum on Czech Republic leaving the EU, like a Brexit-style vote.
Do you think there's a real chance of a Czechzit referendum?
I think it can happen. I'm not saying we are leaving the EU tomorrow, but this trend is very much here. And if they have a president who is supporting this agenda, that is very dangerous for the whole country.
Do you think a referendum should be held here?
Kdo jiný než lidé nebo občané by měli rozhodnout o tom, co s nima bude nebo jak budou žít. No, proč by člověk z Bruselu mi měl říct, nemáš na to nárok? Každý politik, který se dostane k moci, tak si najednou myslí, že je chytřejší nebo má jinou díru do zadku než my ostatní. Jako, tak to není. Proč já bych měl poslouchat nebo chovat se podle vzoru Belgičana nebo Francouze nebo Němce? Já jsem Čech,
Last month, the internet was up in arms over the Federal Communications Commission's repeal of net neutrality.
It means repealing regulations that prevented your internet provider from blocking certain websites or slowing down your data. Now they can, and that's wrong.
But even though the repeal is yet to go into effect, mobile carriers may already be throttling traffic. A lot. Dave Choffnes is a professor of computer science at Northeastern University. Along with his PhD students, he built WeHe, an app that detects data throttling on mobile phones.
So what we have here are 3 phones running your app, right?
Right.
This one's on AT&T,
Yep.
This one's on Verizon,
Yep.
And this one's connected to Wi-Fi.
Exactly.
So how do they work?
So the way it works, we can start here with AT&T. When you pull up the app, you see there's a bunch of options. What we want to do is run tests. So we tap on Run Test, and then there's a whole bunch of apps you can pick from to decide which one you want to test to see if your network is throttling. So it's telling you it's contacting our servers. So what we're doing now is it says running the original replay. That means we're sending the traffic that looks like YouTube. We do have a result here, and what we found here is that when you're using data traffic that looks like YouTube, you get 2 megabits per second. But when we send the traffic in a way that it doesn't look like YouTube, you get 6 megabits per second. So this is what we mean by throttling.
So that's like a clear and blatant violation of net neutrality. That's about as simple as it gets.
Yeah, the network is not being neutral. One app is getting different performance than something that is not that app.
When we reached out to AT&T, they told us the company is, quote, committed to an open internet, and that they don't throttle, discriminate, or degrade network performance based on content. They also say it, quote, fails to account for a user's choice of settings or a plan that may affect speeds. WeHe is one of the first ways for the public to clearly see when mobile carriers may be slowing down data on apps like Netflix, YouTube, and Skype. If providers are caught violating net neutrality rules, they face FCC fines. But in the 3 years since net neutrality took effect, no mobile carriers have ever been fined. Choffnes says that's because carriers use a loophole to get around the rules.
So we have rules in place that are supposed to prevent exactly this from happening. Why are mobile carriers able to do this?
Well, we did have rules that put this in place. At the time, those rules did allow an exception, and that was what was called reasonable network management. So the idea is if you have a bunch of users streaming video, and as a result, the other users connected to the same cell tower aren't able to check their email or aren't able to check websites, well, that seems pretty unfair. And in that case, it is reasonable to manage your network by, say, slowing down those video users so that everyone can be able to use the network efficiently.
Right. But carriers are throttling video to sites like Netflix all the time.
That's right. So we have never found any case where we saw that one of these policies where they slow down video traffic only applies during busy hours. As far as we can tell, it applies 24/7.
Complaints to the FCC are the only way for the public to raise the issue. In the last week, over 120,000 people have downloaded WeHe, meaning people all across the country may finally have the data they need to highlight violations.
So they're doing this right now, even when net neutrality rules are on the books. So how are they able to get away with it?
That's a great question for the FCC.
Just want to let you know I will be filing a petition for
That's Vice News Tonight for Friday, January 26th.
The president has not even discussed that. The president is not discussing firing Bob Mueller. I'm not the president's lawyer here, but I will tell you as his counselor, he is not discussing that.
The president will not fire the special counsel, saying that's never been on the table, never. It's a manifestation of the media.
I haven't given it any thought. I mean, I've been reading about it from you people. You say, oh, I'm going to dismiss him. No, I'm not dismissing anybody.
Are you considering firing Robert Mueller?
No, not at all.
There is no consideration of firing the special counsel.
Is he setting the stage for firing Bob Mueller?
No, there's no
way. There's no way he's going to fire him.
There's no conversation about that whatsoever in the White House, Chuck.
No, I'm not. No.
There is no consideration being given to the termination of the special counsel.
It wasn't until I became a politician that I realized how nasty, how mean, how vicious, and how fake the press can be as the cameras start going off in the back.